She was old enough to know better. I was young enough to fall anyway. For months, we pretended it was harmless. The late-night conversations, the way her hand lingered on my arm, the silence that felt heavier than words. And then one night, as I reached for the door, her fingers wrapped softly around my wrist. Her voice barely above a whisper. Don't leave me wondering what could have been. That was the moment everything changed. A small dinner at her place. Soft music playing somewhere in the background. Candles flickering low on the dining table long after dessert plates had been cleared. She moved through the room with that effortless confidence she always carried, the kind that didn't demand attention but naturally held it. A fitted dark sweater, simple jewelry, her hair loosely pinned up in a way that revealed the graceful line of her neck. I noticed that about her before. The details. When the last guest left, the house grew quiet in a way that felt almost intentional. The kind of silence that presses gently against your chest. I helped her carry the empty glasses into the kitchen. Our fingers brushed when she reached for one at the same time I did. Neither of us apologized. Neither of us laughed it off. We just paused. You don't have to stay and clean, she said softly, though she didn't step away. I don't mind, I replied, and I meant it. We stood closer than usual at the sink. The warmth from her shoulder radiated faintly through my sleeve. I could smell her perfume, subtle, something floral but grounded. Not sweet, mature, steady. After the kitchen was done, we lingered in the hallway near the front door. That space suddenly felt smaller. I told myself not to overthink it. She was composed, experienced, someone who understood boundaries better than I did. If there was a line, she would never cross it. I should go, I finally said, though my body didn't move. She nodded at first, but when I reached for the door handle, her hand came up, lightly, almost uncertain, and wrapped around my wrist. Not gripping, just resting there. Her touch was warm, steady. Her thumb shifted slightly against my pulse as if she could feel it racing. I looked down at her hand, then back at her. Up close, I could see something in her expression that hadn't been there earlier. The confidence was still there, but beneath it was hesitation, vulnerability. The kind you only show when you're afraid of losing something you haven't even admitted you want. You're quiet tonight, I said gently. She let out a small breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm thinking, she replied. About what? Her gaze searched my face slowly, like she was memorizing it. The curve of my jaw, the uncertainty in my eyes. The youth she kept pretending didn't matter. And then she said it, softly, almost like it scared her. Don't leave me wondering what could have been. The hallway seemed to still around us. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was offering. Not recklessness, not impulse, possibility. Her fingers loosened slightly, as if giving me the choice to step away. I didn't. Instead, I turned fully toward her, closing the small distance between us. My free hand hovered near her waist before resting there gently, careful, respectful. I could feel her inhale sharply at the contact. Not shocked, just aware. We didn't kiss. We didn't rush. We just stood there, her hand still around my wrist, mine resting at her side, our breaths sinking slowly in the quiet of her home. In that suspended moment, I realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. If I walked out that door, I wouldn't just be leaving her house. I'd be leaving us, and neither of us wanted that. If I'm honest, nothing about the beginning felt dangerous. There was no dramatic first meeting, no instant spark that set the room on fire. It was quieter than that, softer. I first started coming around her house because she'd asked for help setting up something simple. Her new laptop, I think. She'd laughed when she admitted she wasn't terrible with technology, just impatient with it. I remember teasing her about it, and instead of rolling her eyes, she smiled in a way that lingered. That smile stayed with me longer than it should have. She treated me like she had nothing to prove. No performance. No trying too hard. She'd lean back in her chair at the kitchen counter, one elbow resting on the marble surface, chin balanced lightly on her hand while I explained things she already half understood. Her gaze never drifted. When I spoke, she listened like it mattered. That was new for me. One evening turned into two, then three. Sometimes I'd stop by just to drop something off, and somehow I'd still be there an hour later, sitting across from her with 2 mugs of tea between us. The steam would rise slowly into the warm kitchen light, and our conversations would drift from small talk into things that felt real. She told me about her past, not in heavy detail, but enough. A long marriage that ended quietly. Dreams she once had that shifted with time. The way she'd learned to stand on her own without bitterness. There was strength in her voice when she spoke, but sometimes I caught a softness underneath it. The kind of vulnerability she probably didn't show often. I didn't tell her everything about myself, but I told her more than I told most people. About feeling like I was still figuring life out. About the pressure to have a plan when I barely understood who I was becoming. She never dismissed it. "You're more self-aware than you think," she said once, brushing an invisible crumb off the counter near my hand. Her fingers lingered just slightly closer to mine than necessary. It was small moments like that. A brush of shoulders when we leaned over the same screen. Her hand resting briefly on my forearm when she laughed at something I said. The way she'd tilt her head when I got passionate about something, eyes warm with quiet admiration. One night, we were sitting on her couch reviewing photos from a trip she'd taken years ago. The lamp beside us cast a golden glow, softening the room. At some point, I noticed how close we were sitting. Our thighs nearly touched. I could feel the faint warmth of her through the fabric of her jeans. Neither of us moved. She reached over to take the phone from my hand to zoom in on a picture. Our fingers overlapped for just a second too long. Her breath caught, barely noticeable, but I felt it. She looked at me then, not like I was a kid helping her with gadgets. Just like a man. That was the first time something shifted. We didn't name it. We didn't acknowledge it. But from that night on, there was an awareness between us, quiet, electric, unspoken. And the most dangerous part, it hadn't started with desire. It had started with comfort, with understanding, with 2 people sitting across from each other at a kitchen counter, not realizing they were slowly building something neither of them would know how to walk away from. After that night on the couch, something subtle but undeniable changed between us. Not in a dramatic way. She didn't suddenly flirt. I didn't suddenly confess anything reckless. If anything, we both became more careful with our words. But our bodies betrayed us. She started standing a little closer when we talked, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her before she even touched me. When she laughed, her hand would find my arm more easily now, resting there for an extra second, her thumb pressing lightly as if grounding herself. It never felt accidental. One afternoon, I came by while it was raining. The sky had turned gray, and the house felt quieter than usual. She was wearing a soft cream sweater, sleeves pushed slightly up her forearms. Her hair was down, falling naturally over her shoulders instead of pinned up like usual. The look wasn't intentional, but it felt more intimate somehow. The power flickered once while we were in the living room. Then again. "Of course," she murmured with a small smile, lighting a few candles from a drawer nearby. The room dimmed into a warm, golden glow. We sat on a couch again, closer this time because of the smaller pool of light. The storm outside made the space feel contained, private, like the world had shrunk down to just the 2 of us and the sound of rain against the windows. She reached over to adjust my collar absent-mindedly, smoothing the fabric near my neck. "You always forget this part," she said softly. Her fingers brushed the side of my throat in the process. Warm, gentle. My breath caught before I could stop it. She noticed. Her hand paused for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary before she pulled it back. But instead of leaning away, she stayed right there, close enough that I could see the tiny lines at the corners of her eyes, the softness in her gaze. The air between us felt heavier. "Are you cold?" she asked quietly, though her voice sounded slightly unsteady. I'm Fina. But I wasn't. Not really. Because the awareness between us was no longer something we could pretend didn't exist. Later that evening, when the rain softened, she shifted slightly on the couch. Our knees brushed. This time, she didn't move them apart. I didn't either. We kept talking about ordinary things, work, books, a movie she'd seen recently, but every pause felt loaded. Every glance lasted just a beat too long. Her eyes would drift to my lips before flickering back up to meet mine, as if she were catching herself. That's when the internal struggle started. I began questioning myself. Was I imagining it? Was I reading too much into simple gestures? She was older, experienced. Maybe this closeness meant something different to her than it did to me. But then she'd look at me in that quiet, searching way, and doubt would fade. Still, she began pulling back in small ways. She started jokingly calling me kid again, as if reminding both of us of the difference between us. When our hands brushed, she'd withdraw faster. When our conversations drifted too close to vulnerability, she'd change the subject. She was building distance. And it hurt more than I expected, because the shift had already happened. We could pretend. We could joke. We could redefine the boundaries in words. But our bodies remembered the warmth of that candlelit room, and neither of us could unfeel that. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was subtle at first, small enough that I questioned whether I was imagining it. Her replies to my texts became shorter. The late-night conversations that used to stretch past midnight suddenly ended earlier. When I stopped by, she always seemed just slightly preoccupied, as if her mind was somewhere else. But it wasn't somewhere else. It was here, with me. One afternoon, I found her in the kitchen again, sunlight pouring in through the window. She was standing at the counter, slicing fruit carefully, her posture composed like always. But when she heard my footsteps, she didn't turn around immediately. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," she replied, her tone warm but guarded. I leaned against the opposite side of the counter, watching her hands move with deliberate precision. There used to be ease between us in moments like this. Now there was space. Not physical space. We were still only a few feet apart, but emotional distance. "You've been busy," I said, trying to keep my voice light. She finally looked up. For a brief second, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe even regret. "Just trying to keep things balanced," she answered. Balanced. The word settled heavily in my chest. There was a silence that followed, thick and uncomfortable. I wasn't used to that with her. Our silences used to feel full. Now they felt cautious. "Did I do something?" I asked quietly. Her hand paused mid-slice. The knife rested against the cutting board. She shook her head immediately. "No, you didn't." But she didn't continue. I walked around the counter slowly, stopping just close enough that I could see the faint tension in her jaw. Up close, I noticed how tired her eyes looked, like she hadn't been sleeping well. "You can tell me," I said, my voice softer now. She exhaled slowly and set the knife down. When she finally met my gaze, the confidence she usually carried had thinned. Beneath it was uncertainty I hadn't seen before. "You deserve someone at the same place in life as you," she said carefully. "Someone who won't complicate things." The words were steady, but her fingers betrayed her. They twisted slightly at the hem of her sleeve, the way they did when she was nervous. "And you think you would?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her eyes drifted down to the floor, then back up to me. There was something almost protective in her expression, like she was trying to shield me from something she believed would hurt me later. "It's not about what I want," she whispered. That was the first time she admitted it without admitting it. I closed the remaining distance between us slowly, giving her time to step away if she needed to. She didn't. I reached for her hand carefully, my fingers brushing hers before fully holding them. Her skin felt warm, but her hand trembled slightly against mine. "You don't get to decide what I deserve," I said gently, "especially not without asking me." Her breath faltered at that. For a moment, we just stood there, her hand in mine, the sunlight warming the space around us. The distance she'd tried to create felt fragile now, like it might crumble with one more honest word. But I could still see the conflict in her eyes. She wasn't pulling away because she didn't feel it. She was pulling away because she did. The evening felt different before either of us said a word. The sun was sinking low, casting everything in that soft golden light that makes even ordinary moments feel fragile. We were sitting on her porch, side by side on the wooden bench she'd had for years. The air was cool, brushing lightly against my skin, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from somewhere in her garden. There was enough space between us to be respectful. but not enough to feel distant. She had her hands folded loosely in her lap, fingers intertwined, thumbs tracing absent circles against each other. It was a nervous habit I'd come to recognize. She only did it when she was thinking too much. "I've been trying to do the right thing," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. I didn't interrupt. The cicadas hummed softly in the background. Somewhere down the street, a car passed, then silence returned. "I keep telling myself this is just admiration," she continued. "That I enjoy talking to you because you're thoughtful, because you're kind." She let out a soft breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Because you're easy to be around." Her shoulder brushed mine slightly as she shifted. But it's not just that. The confession didn't come dramatically. It slipped out like something she'd been holding too tightly for too long. I turned toward her, not fully, just enough that our knees nearly touched. She hesitated for a second before her hand moved, slowly, carefully, until it rested lightly on my knee. Not gripping, not claiming, just resting there. Her palm was warm through the fabric of my jeans. The contact felt simple, but it sent something steady and electric through my chest. My breath deepened without me meaning it to. "I don't want to blur your future," she said softly. "I don't want to be a chapter you look back on and regret." I reached down then, covering her hand with mine. My fingers curled gently around hers, feeling the slight tremor she hadn't been able to hide. "You don't feel like a chapter," I said honestly. "You feel like clarity." That made her look at me, really look at me. The guarded composure she usually carried wasn't there. Instead, there was openness. Fear, yes, but also hope. "You make me feel steady," I continued. "Like I don't have to prove myself. Like I'm not just young." Her eyes softened at that, something vulnerable flickering behind them. Slowly, she shifted closer. Not enough to make it obvious. Just enough that our shoulders pressed together fully now. I could feel the warmth of her arm against mine, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. She leaned her head toward me carefully, giving me time to move away if I wanted. I didn't. Her forehead came to rest against my shoulder. The weight of it was light but deliberate. I could feel the softness of her hair brushing my neck, the faint warmth of her breath through my shirt. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, the sky fading from gold to deep blue, our hands still intertwined on my knee. No grand declarations, no promises yet, just two people who had finally stopped pretending they didn't feel something real. And in that quiet closeness, it became impossible to deny. Whatever this was, it wasn't admiration anymore. It was something deeper, and neither of us wanted to let it go. It didn't take long for the world to notice. Not in dramatic ways. No confrontations. No public scenes. Just small things. Subtle looks that lingered a second too long. A raised eyebrow from someone who thought they were being discreet. A joking comment from a friend that wasn't entirely a joke. We were at a small gathering one evening. Mutual friends, soft music, glasses clinking. She stood beside me near the kitchen island, close enough that our shoulders brushed occasionally when someone squeezed past. It felt natural, easy, until someone said lightly, "You two spent a lot of time together lately." There was a smile attached to it, but there was also implication. She laughed it off smoothly. She always handled things with grace. But I felt her shift beside me, just slightly. Her hand, which had been resting casually near mine on the counter, withdrew. Later that night, when most of the guests had drifted outside, I found her alone in the hallway. The warm confidence she usually wore in social settings had dimmed. She stood near the window, arms folded loosely, staring out into the dark. "You okay?" I asked gently. She didn't turn right away. "I knew this would happen," she said quietly. The words weren't bitter, just tired. I stepped closer, careful not to corner her. There was enough space between us for her to breathe, but close enough that she could feel I was there. "It was just a comment," I said. "It's never just a comment," she replied softly. "It's the beginning of judgment." She turned then, and I saw it clearly, the protective instinct rising in her. Not for herself, for me. "I won't let you be reduced to a story," she continued, "or a phase, or someone who doesn't know what he's doing." Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes did. She was trying to build distance again. I reached out slowly, giving her every chance to step back. When my fingers touched her wrist, she stilled. I let my hand slide gently down until our palms met, threading my fingers through hers. Her skin felt warm, but there was tension in it, like she was holding something inside. "I'm not choosing you because it's easy," I said quietly. "And I'm not here because I don't know what I'm doing." She searched my face carefully, as if looking for hesitation, doubt, immaturity. I didn't look away. Slowly, I lifted my free hand and rested 2 fingers lightly beneath her chin, guiding her gaze fully to mine. The gesture wasn't forceful, just steady, intentional. Her breath caught softly at the contact. "You don't get to protect me from something I'm walking toward willingly," I added. For a moment, everything else faded. The noise from outside, the weight of other people's opinions, the unspoken rules neither of us had written. It was just her eyes on mine. Her fingers tightened around my hand slightly, not in fear, but in decision. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered. "You won't," I answered. The tension in her shoulders eased just a little. Not completely, but enough. Instead of stepping back this time, she stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body through the thin space between us. Her forehead hovered near mine, not touching, just almost. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't rebellion. It was choice. And for the first time, she didn't move away first. The night comes back to me in fragments. The quiet hallway, the soft amber light from the lamp near the stairs, the way the air felt heavier than usual, like the house itself was holding its breath. We were standing by the front door again, exactly where everything had almost ended before it truly began. "I should go," I said, though neither of us moved. She walked me to the door like she always did, her steps unhurried, but there was something different in her silence. It wasn't guarded this time. It felt decisive. My hand reached for the handle, and just like before, her fingers wrapped around my wrist. But this time, there was no hesitation in her touch. It wasn't a plea. It was an invitation. When I turned to face her, she didn't look away. Her eyes held mine steadily, a quiet storm of fear and hope and courage all at once. "I don't want to be brave alone," she said softly. "And I don't want to wake up months from now wondering if we let something real slip past us." Her thumb brushed lightly against the inside of my wrist, right over my pulse. The contact was gentle but grounding. I could feel my heartbeat under her touch, and I knew she could too. "Don't leave me wondering what could have been." This time I didn't freeze. I stepped closer, slowly enough to give her space to change her mind. She didn't. My hand moved to her waist, resting there carefully. I felt the warmth of her through the fabric of her dress, the subtle rise and fall of her breathing. Her hand slid upward from my wrist to my forearm, then to my shoulders, not pulling me in, but holding me there. There was no rush, no desperation, just intention. "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. "Not because it's safe, not because it's easy, but because it's you." Her breath softened against my collarbone. I reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair away from her face. My fingers grazed her cheek, and she leaned into the touch instinctively, her eyes fluttering closed for a second, as if she'd been waiting for that permission. When she opened them again, the fear was still there, but it wasn't leading anymore. She tilted her face slightly toward mine. The kiss wasn't urgent. It was slow, careful, warm. Her lips met mine gently, like we were both memorizing the feeling rather than chasing it. One of her hands slipped around my neck, her fingers resting lightly in my hairline. I felt her exhale softly against me, and something inside my chest finally settled. When we pulled back, our foreheads rested together. We didn't smile immediately. We just breathed. Outside, the world was still complicated. People would still talk. Questions would still exist. But in that small space between her front door and my steady hands at her waist, none of that felt louder than this. She pressed her cheek lightly against my chest, her arms sliding around my back, holding me, not tightly, just fully. I wrapped mine around her in return, feeling the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat against me. The door closed behind us, not as a goodbye, but as the beginning of something we had both finally chosen. No more wondering, no more almost. Just us, stepping forward together,